Namaste, everyone. I'm going to give you Kundalini Yoga for resilience. The time that we're in with this pandemic, it demands resilience. And whenever we're in this period, which we have been many times, many moons in our human history, that demands human resilience. We can call it the crisis that always is, the crisis that always is. It's during the period of major transmutation and transformation that happens for reformation. And we know on this planet that we are experiencing major transmutation in many forms that show up in the deconstruction of any kind of template, any structure in the mind, any structure in society. That could be a belief system, that could be a social economic circumstance, that can be an ancient old predicament. When there's a collapse, and even in our personal lives, when there's a collapse, it means that we're transmutating energy and we're transforming for reformation. And I see that that's going on very much on this planet. And during this time, in many periods of the crises that always is, Yogi Bhajan talks about, the resilience, I see it's composed of patience, tolerance, and the waiting, right? And us as human beings, especially in our Western society as Americans, patience, tolerance, and waiting is not something that we enjoy, right? Because we are very much, I do me, you do you, right? I can do what I want, I do what I want, right? So when we're told by the universe, not even by our society, just by the universe, with any sort of catastrophe that happens, that you have to be patient, you have to be tolerant, you have to wait, that will definitely go against especially our kind of human understanding of I do what I want, right? We're all in this sort of race, in this sort of haste, in this sort of hassle, in this sort of chase, right? This I call it a competition, and competition is wonderful, right? But this aggressive competition is more belittling, right? There's a lot of envy associated with that, and there's a lot of trying to get the upper hand. And we know in many ways when we're trying to get the upper hand, right, a lot of times we can lose our integrity when we're trying to get the upper hand, we're trying to get ahead, right? So with resilience is a time where our character will be tested, and sometimes our character will be broken down, and we will experience the major, you can call it depression, you can call it dark night of the soul, you can call it everything. Your whole identity can almost collapse or shatter, right? And there's these pieces, and a lot of people can feel lost or confused. And I think that's a time where you get to reinvent yourself, right? We need to look at it as a point of reinvent yourself. It's a perfect time to reinvent yourself, right? Because resilience, I see it as a reinvention. Resilience is always that sort of the preface, or the preface, I want to say, the prefaces, the sort of preface to reinvention, right? Because in that period, that's when you really get to shake loose. That's where you really get to have a life review, right? And sometimes we're forced to have a life review because we're on this planet, we're dealing with a karma, we're dealing with our ancestral karma, we're dealing with social economic karma, right? And when we're at a standstill, which many of us don't like to be, that's when we really get to tap into our potential, our higher potential. That's really when we get to raise our vibration. So in this time, we're being asked to have resilience in the way that we, in the life review, we get to see what is not working. And what is not working will become so obvious, right? In many ways. And we're gonna experience it in our emotions, in our thoughts, in our routine. I mean, you could see it as in the structure of our educational system, our pharmaceutical system, our healthcare system. I mean, we could go very macro, we could go very micro, right, when it comes to the reformation that wants to take place. So I call it the reinvention, re-identification, redefinition, reformation. So all of that is kind of like, I see it as like a life review. It's a re-parenting ultimately, right? I see that kind of the reparenting is sort of the space that holds all of the reinvention, re-identification, redefinition, reformation. It all kind of comes with that parenting that we have when we're kind of held in this holding pattern, right? And when you're held in a holding pattern, you really get to see what kind of pattern you have, and that's when you really get to get real with yourself, right? And also you really can unlock greater imagination. You can also unlock a higher creativity that comes from within, right? Because when you are forced in any way, which it feels like, right, forced into yourself, into being reliant on yourself to get you through, I think that really does create a deeper creative power. That creates a deeper creative power when you have to rely on yourself. And I think that is a warrior practice, or any sort of practice if you're a soldier or in the army, to be able to rely on yourself, right? So that people can rely on you and that you can rely on others. To know how to reinvent yourself, to know how to re-identify, know how to reform, right? That gives you this sort of creative problem solving. That is what we're being asked to do, because the mediocrity that we so get into in any way of our relationships, of our career, of our house, just putting our heads in the sand, in many ways is you don't have that. It's so obvious. It's so easy to see. It's like right there, right? This any mediocrity that we're doing with ourselves is just not going to cut it, right? We're really being asked to step into a creative problem solving, regardless if you're 25, 35, 45, 55, even if you're 85. And I think that is, when we talk about the Homo sapien 2.0, I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the human being having these particular pathways in the brain that are leading into creative expansion, and how we really kind of carve that out, kind of like you're weed whacking through the jungle type of thing, is through the ability to relate to yourself, to have that life review, right? Some people, I swear, they don't want to have a life review. They'd rather just die or wait until they're dead to have the life review, right? So they can really step into the expansion of their potential. So, the crisis that always is, we've gone through major crises on this planet. You could spend hours just going over all of the crises that human beings have faced. In many different forms, not just when it comes to health and when it comes to security and well-being. We're talking about so many things, and all of that really was human beings unlocking a greater creative potential. And I think that's what we're doing. We're unlocking a greater creative potential. So when we think of like Elon Musk and like going to Mars, like human beings on this planet are just not calibrated for that level of creative expansion. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if we were trying to get some human beings to Mars, a lot of people, even the human beings probably won't even be able to like last, right? Mentally, emotionally, physically, right? Because we're just not calibrated to have that kind of expanded awareness to be intergalactic, right? Even when we think of the word intergalactic, a lot of people are like, thinking that this kind of, you're some sort of space alien hippie weirdo or something like that, right? People just are not calibrated to that. And the older generations, they have even a more sort of like, whoa, a sort of shock, right? When you hear about this sort of creative expansion that's happening within the younger generations. Working with children, I have had conversations. I've asked them blatantly about creative expansion, what that means to them. And these kids, they will like have full-blown conversations with you, right? Even if they don't know how to articulate themselves. I mean, they give it to you. They send it to you in their aura, in their movement, in their expression, right? That's what they want. Creative expansion, right? I mean, they're drawn to that. And a lot of kids who have that background of creative expansion, let's say, parents that, that they have that sort of lifestyle, right? These kids are very driven by humanitarian environmentalist studies, right? They're very driven by the earth, appreciation for the earth, and the sort of livelihood of the earth, right? And the livelihood of the earth as human beings, it does start with our integrity as human beings, right? Because it's easy to sell the cheap fake stuff, right? It's easy, but the livelihood of the earth, it's like I don't know what I was trying to say, but when we are in our integrity as human beings, the livelihood of the planet, it almost becomes more radiant, right? And I think that has always been the test of time, always. And we've got to see, the karma of that, right? The karma of our livelihood. And there's all kinds of different groups of people who are, different dimensions of this earth, really, right? When it comes to warlike dimensions, when it comes to peaceful dimensions. I mean, this life, it's like choose your adventure type of thing, right? When it comes to warlike dimensions, when it comes to peace-like dimensions, choose your adventure, right? And with every dimension, you have karma that you play out on behalf of that lineage that is a part of that dimension, right? Or the groups of people that you're connected with, and the friends and your family, right? And the sort of cause and effect, right? Your choices that you make in those type of dimensions. And I think the integrity is really about the life review, because when we think of death and like near-death experience, I'm thinking of like integrity. When you die and they supposedly you're asked, what did you come to Earth to do? What did you do, and how do you feel about that? The question you're asked when you get to see the panorama show of your life. What did you come to do? What did you do, and how do you feel about that? Right? And kids have a separate after death sort of space, right? Adults have a different space they go to, right? Kids, they just kind of just jump into the higher dimension, but humans, we have to go through this holding period so that we can have that life review, so that we can maintain our integrity. Because our integrity is, we can call it the word truth. Being in your truth, that's kind of what it is. And the truth I'm talking about is you being in your creative expansion. I think that's what truth is. Truth is not right, wrong, bad, good. It's really about being in the creative expansion. It's like being in taking accountability and responsibility for what you decide, your perspective, right? Why did you decide that? What led to you deciding that, right? And being honest. And it's not I'm crucifying myself, putting myself into this hell, right? For the choice. And creative expansion and any sort of business of that, we'll say, it's not so much about the failure. It's more so about the ability to learn is really what it is. The ability to learn. Now, when we keep making the same failure, the same mistake, that's when we start to have the judgment. And judgment is not, you go to purgatory, you go to hell, shame on you, die on the cross, right? The judgment we're talking about is where you get to experience the karma of that failure, or the mistake, the repetitive loop, or you get to experience the rock bottom, or you get to experience the sort of pressure the universe puts on you to learn your lesson, right? It puts pressure on you. And that's, when people are under pressure, they can get really, people can get really uncomfortable with that pressure. So, but when we have this constant failure, like let's say you keep failing the test, like you keep getting your math test, you've taken it 3 times and you keep failing. I feel like that's the pressure you get on your teacher is for you to learn. The judgment you get is not go to hell, purgatory, you're terrible. I feel like it's the pressure of the life lesson. I can use this one. I'm playing it. So that's what we're going to work on, that resilience, right? That resilience that is that sort of holding space for reparenting of ourselves, right? And that leads to reinvention, re-identification, redefinition, and then reformation. And then working on that kind of quality of life, that quality of life, resilience, again, patience, tolerance, and waiting, that really brings about this sort of life review, right? And that life review, like I'm saying, when we die, right? And kids, they have this life review all the time, right? It's really about your integrity, right? Within yourself. And the pressure of your life lesson or your karma, the pressure of it, where you just feel like you need to move in a new way, right? Or you need to study, or you need to be productive, or you need to make a choice, or whatever that pressure is that you just feel it on you. All of it's doing is it's helping you to step into your integrity, your creative expansion, right? It's all that's asking for you to step into your creative expansion. But when we're not in our integrity, we sabotage. We don't want to have the life review, because judgment from the child's perspective becomes judgment of, I'm a terrible person, all of the negative programming that literally just drags us through the mud and gets us nowhere, right? So, and when, people are overwhelmed, or, it's like, it's really intense, the integrity of other people, or the life review they're having, it's really about the creative expansion that wants to come through, right? It wants to come through in a big way. So when I see people that are like, I'm overwhelmed, it's so intense, right? The life, lesson, the karma, what my integrity, my life review, it's like so much pressure on me, right? Because there's so much creative expansion that wants to happen, that wants to come through. You wants to come through, and you don't need necessarily to know what that is, what action you're going to take, what's the next step, because a lot of times that comes from kind of, I call it American programming, that if you're not productive, then what the hell are you doing, right? And that program in many ways is not productive, right? Because there's a period of resilience, and that is a period of creative expansion. That's a period where you get to really rub against yourself, have that friction within yourself, so that you can really start to align with who you are, and what kind of reinvention that you want to provide, right? And that gives you this quality of work. And usually when we talk about quality from a scale of productivity to the American mind, quality of work is something about you having this consistent over years of wiring yourself into the integrity of what gives you the reinvention that provides more imagination, more potential, not less, right? And that will demand of you to really relate to yourself, have a conversation with yourself. Really will demand of you to really be available to yourself, right? And what's going on around you. Because in our mediocrity, we can not pay attention to what's around us at all, or whatever is going on, and we can get that shake up because that creative expansion wants to come through, right? But it's going to demand of us to show up. It's almost like, again, when you get the you want to go back to school, but you're like, that's going to demand of me, right? And when we're lazy, we procrastinate, we're just sitting around, we get moody because we get upset that we're procrastinating, right? That we're not inviting in fresh energy, right? Then we start to dwell, and then we get over nostalgic, we start to just view the past, get over sentimental, and then what happens, right? So that creative expansion is really about your ability to reinvent yourself according to your integrity, and when it demands of you, which it will, overwhelm. I like to be overwhelmed. I like people that are intense. I like to be like in a what do you call it, Tony Robbins type of environment, right, where it's just like balls to the wall, right? Like being in that kind of environment, right? Or Alan Watts, that type of this sort of teacher, that Saturn teacher, like Yogi Bhajan, that balls to the wall, like in a very sort of in this integrity that reaps, that actually reaps creative expansion on this planet. Because what that does is that pressure, it gets you where you need to go. And sometimes where we need to go as a planet, with even like Elon Musk and SpaceX, it took them years, billions of dollars to get these rockets. Many of them failed, so you can get a rocket that actually works. All the mechanics and the whole technology of it is sound and in a sort of concrete, it has a concrete kind of, it's doing something now, right? That is not going to be easy. And I think those that really have the creative expansion really admire that type of integrity that resilience really does push us to have. Because when we talk about, there's different calibers of like human beings, right? There's different calibers, and we could talk about money, and money can come in and money can go. And usually the people that, let's say they get money and then they are really stingy with it, or they go way over the top with it, usually they don't have necessarily the caliber of that, right? And receiving that, whatever you're receiving, is something about you. It's helping you get your caliber. Wants you to build that caliber. That could be your karma. That could be past life karma, right? And it's building up that caliber to be able to hold that position, right? And people who do really well with that, you can see they have the creative expansion, and they're in that integrity. They want to have that life review. They want you to give it to them straight. They're not afraid for you to give it to them straight, right? Even if their perspective is totally wrong or right or whatever it is, right? Because they know that kind of friction is going to raise the bar. It's going to raise the bar, right? And the more that we raise the bar as an adult, young people as an adult, the more we learn. You know what I'm saying? We're not meant to keep repeating the same, let's say we're algebra class. We're not meant to keep repeating the same algebra 1. We're meant to raise the bar, algebra 2, algebra 3, right? We're meant to learn other subjects, right? So, resilience is about, you're going to be presented with a study, you're going to be presented with a calling, you're going to be presented with a blueprint, or you're going to be presented with an idea. And it's going to be a part of your creative expansion. It'll be given to you through your intuition. And it's going to demand of you to have the life review you need. Reinvent yourself. So have a life review. Reinvent yourself. Have the life review. Reinvent yourself. And move forward. Right? So bring the hands together.